Good morning. I'm Reverend Liz Lerner-McClay, and on behalf of our worship associate, Kim Noble, and our chalice lighter, Karen Silva Sabatoni, I welcome you to worship this morning and to the First Unitarian Church of Providence, where we love beyond belief. When you see just a few of us here, it is not always apparent how many people are involved in making Sunday happen. So I want to take this opportunity to thank also Reverend Roger, who is off this Sunday on a well-deserved break and still managed to organize our joys and sorrows, and Fred Jodry, our music director, who has recorded our prelude, hymn, and offertory for this Sunday, our director of religious education, Kathy Sagal, and assistant youth music director, Christy Martell, who have been leading children's chapel over in the parish house, and all our volunteers leading the Spiritual Pathways online gatherings for children and youth, along with everyone else who is here today, our Sunday building manager, Pedro Vasquez, and our First U members and friends, Tom Getz, Richard Buber, Jonathan Niles, Michael Capelli, and Derek Smith, who are training to be part of our new Sunday tech team and will be taking over our webcast in the next few weeks from BYB Pictures, who have been figuring out how we can best do this and teaching us how to do it together. These days are full of so much. It is precious to have this community, to be committed to this church, to this faith, to each other, to help us hold and respond to it all. This is the day we have been given. May we make the very most of it, starting right now together. Our invocation today is an excerpt from For the Ordination of Carol Baudot by the Reverend Greg Ward. It's time to ask ourselves the questions that have kept civilization awake at night. What will be required of us to retain our humanness in the 21st century? What has love asked of us that we've been unwilling to give? If we saw a bodhisattva or a saint on the way home, what would they be doing? How long, Lord, do we have to pretend we're invincible and not lonely? These disturbing questions have kept people from making their quota at work 27 years in a row, toiling at a job that never made their hearts sing. Why do we look so intently for numbers and shut our ears to the song? Why do we wait so long to question the fear in our lives and settle for such distance between souls? When does the training end and love begin? This very day, a promise may be answered and some new way taken. So if today you notice joy appear, stand at the platform of your imagination, and in that split second when the doors open, jump in. Pause in the company of such dreamers. Put your ear to the wall of your heart. Listen for the truth being whispered there. And now we have our chalice lighting. Our chalice is being lit by our member, Karen Silva Sabatoni, this morning. Can you please join me in the words that we say every Sunday morning together? This light burns also in our hearts, and it lights our path toward harmony, justice, and hope for all. And our hymn this morning is the wonderful "There is More Love Somewhere." Let's hear it together and join in singing as we are able.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere.
I have been wondering what the morning glories know. Is it envy that compels these vines to strangle their other flowers arising in their path? or perhaps self-preservation, to climb these walls, forsaking humbler beings, winding greedy stems around the trellis in their hungry pursuit of light. Still, every morning, basking in their spiral shadows, I want to believe it is something more, this fevered yearning to open purple flowers yield bold-throated glorias to the sun. And in the blaze of afternoon, curl petals softly into shyness. And every morning I plead with the dew-moist buds to know their secret joy, to open and close without holding, to surrender all to light, to sing, I am completely yours, over and over again.
Let us begin the sharing of our joys and sorrows. A candle of thanks to all at First Unitarian for dedicating our baby last spring and making us a family. A candle of joy as Judy and Charlie welcome their 4th grandchild. A candle of gratitude. Reverend Rogers' well-developed topic on blame got me interested in joining the coffee hour for the first time. Thank you all for the excellent programming, which makes this possible. A candle of sorrow for Mark Ollie, who died earlier this year at the onset of COVID at just 56 years of age. We have a double candle prayer this morning. Beth Ann Tierney, who is always in our prayers, wants prayers and wellness for her brother-in-law, Roy, who starts a very aggressive cancer treatment this week. There is a candle of both joy and sorrow, respectively, for my daughter, who is settling into boarding school very nicely. There is joy. And that I am losing my battle to find a kidney donor to save my life. There is sorrow. A candle of hope for my daughter, who is the sole breadwinner for her young family and was just laid off from the job that supports them all. I pray that she and they will weather this challenge with grace and fortitude and ultimately land in a better place. And finally, a shared community candle, a candle of joy, of sorrow, of worry, of healing, of hope, for the young bike rider still in a coma, for the young father who brought his baby daughter home from the hospital yesterday, though she died today, for all the families and all the suffering, for all the grief and loss, and every little moment of joy that we manage to find. This is COVID fatigue, and we are all tired. But now is just when we need to be the strongest. May we please hold fast for each other in love. Amen. And now, let us join our hearts in the spirit of prayer and meditation. Our words this morning are from the British poet Sheena Poo, and then we will hold silence together. If you have lost someone close to you in the past year, we invite you, even at home, to stand or raise your hand in silent witness of that loss, just as I will be standing here in the meeting house. And then we close with our singing bowl we've begun to use to round out that time. Sometimes things don't go, after all, from bad to worse. Some years, muscadel faces down frost. Green thrives. Crops do not fail. Sometimes a man aims high and all goes well. A people sometimes will step back from war, elect an honest man, decide they care enough that they can't leave some stranger poor. Some men become what they were born for. Sometimes our best intentions do not go amiss. Sometimes we do as we meant to. The sun will sometimes melt a field of sorrow that seemed hard frozen. May it happen for you. I have two stories to share with you this morning, and one something else. The first story is my friend John Cresswell's story. John is a Unitarian Universalist minister who is black and serving our congregation in Annapolis, and I have his permission to share this story with you. A few months ago, the week after George Floyd was killed by police in Minneapolis, the white owner of an ice cream shop in Annapolis, Maryland, posted something that was racially insensitive on social media, and people began to protest online and in person outside his shop. And I do not know exactly what he said, but it doesn't matter, because the story is not about what I or you think of exactly what the shop owner wrote. This is about trusting John's judgment and hearing his story. So the shop owner and his wife were defending themselves with "all lives matter" language and the like, which was, of course, making things worse. And eventually someone noticed that the white owner of this store was Facebook friends with John, who again is black. And so they reached out to John to see if he knew about what was happening. And John could not remember how he and this shop owner were connected, but he decided to go visit the man at his store to talk about what was going on. I want to stop there for just a moment, because what John did is so uncommon. It's not impossible, it's not unknown. It happens, but not nearly enough. And the fact that he is a minister, let me assure you, does not make what he did easy. Whoever you are, whatever color or gender or sexuality or ethnicity or religion or age, takes serious courage to put on your grown-up pants and go by your grown-up self to engage one-on-one with someone who seems to condemn people like you, whatever you may be, to confront what may be hatred, in order to find out what is real in the situation and whether there is an opportunity for understanding, for change, for healing. We have been hearing and talking for so many years now, in fact, since well before the current presidential administration willfully, gleefully deepened these divisions in our nation and leveraged them, but did not create them. We have been talking about the need to engage the other side in order to get past this ever-increasing division and even hatred that is growing in our nation. But that is not what most people have been doing. The stances most people are taking, the stances most people feel they have to take at this point, are so often those of entrenched resistance and hostility. Entrenched, meaning dug in, fortified, what you do in battle. That's what we see. That's what we're doing in this time, just to keep going. Whatever side we're on, of whatever issue, we are usually not making overtures to the other side. The other side. Please remember my earlier sermon this month on how we other each other. But this week, and this is what John did, he went by himself to a place where he had every reason to think he would be at least unwelcome, to confront what might be hatred of him in the hope of healing. The shop owner turned out to be already frightened, humiliated by what he had been subjected to, and immediately began to apologize before John had even really had a chance to do anything but walk in the store. The shop owner's social media statement had provoked some seriously intimidating condemnation from people, but he and John did end up having a serious, extended conversation after that preemptive apology. And the conversation ended up creating what John judged to be good connection and growth. Ultimately, John accepted the man's apology, and they pledged to stay in touch and to be friends. The shop owner promised to donate to racial reconciliation causes and to re-examine his life. It was a big conversation. John posted about this complicated encounter on Facebook, and some folks thanks him for modeling the kind of compassion, courage, transformation, and ministry that we hope for. A lot of people, many of them Unitarian Universalists, eviscerated John, declaring that he had betrayed his own people, that the shop owner did just what he said for publicity and the sake of his business. He didn't really mean anything he'd said to John, that John should never have reached out to him in the first place. You know, when I started this month's theme of forgiveness, I started looking in our gray hymnal, which is cross-referenced in the back a jillion ways, for the theme of forgiveness. I wanted to see what the hymnal recommended in terms of songs and readings, and then I remembered forgiveness isn't listed as a theme in our hymnal. Forgiveness isn't listed as a theme in our hymnal. Not among the readings, not among the songs. There are a couple of readings or songs that mention it, but they are associated with particular holidays or subsumed in much bigger topics and themes. Of itself, this foundational practice that is in most of the world's religions is not in our hymnal. Even on the more current UUA online worship web, there are scant readings on forgiveness, and in terms of music, nothing. Nothing. I think of the reaction to John's outreach and the increasingly punitive and harsh energy I've seen moving through some of our faith's institutions and social media, and I'm sure it's just an oversight that there isn't more in our hymnal and online resources. A lot of people have done really good work on these. And heck, the hymnal's been around for decades now, since long before our nation's divisions began to be so felt as they are now. But still, maybe it's a telling oversight. We are all feeling activated and abraded all the time these days. Everything is difficult and fraught. It was back when the situation in Annapolis happened months ago. It still is now. It still is here. We have had demonstrations all this past week in Providence, fraught with chaos and violence, arrests, conflicting narratives, obstruction of information, moments of wisdom and care or restraint, moments of recklessness and provocation because of what happened to Jamal Gonsalves and then Jaylon Butler and other people of color and protesters. So yes, we are protesting and marching and lobbying, reaching out to end the heartlessness and racism of police brutality or immigration policies or inadequate health care. And rightly, sometimes we have to be dug in. Sometimes it can't be about tolerance or time. Sometimes we have to condemn and protest and fight right now. But if that is our only response ever, then we are embracing our own shortcomings. Lack of compassion, impatience, inability to forgive, even faithlessness to our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. If our response is always only to attack and condemn, then we are being faithless about the importance and possibility of transformation, radical change, or evolution, incremental change, because none of it happens if we don't actually have the patience, compassion, forgiveness, respect required to support and make room for them, for evolution or transformation. We should be fed up with the systems of oppression that pervade our culture and institutions, and too often our own souls as well. But we still have to pay attention to people, to the opportunities for personal change, whether it is sudden transformation or slow evolution, because a lot of people among us and beyond us are encountering that right now. We need to stay strong engaging and honoring the goodness people should be offering each other and for each other. So John Cresswell goes to that white shop owner who is receiving intense shaming and hostility. This was John's choice as a minister and as a black man. And having had what he judged, and John is no fool, a real and important conversation, an important transformational conversation. In the end, John himself being attacked and shamed for daring to engage, to change, to try to heal. Because the approved mode is hostility and condemnation. To what end? Do we really think we can shame each other into love and justice, even just respect? Shaming, silencing, in its most extreme form, canceling people, this will never be the way we save each other. And it will never be the way we save ourselves. Cancel culture came into use around 2017 when the Me Too movement burst onto the scene and people began to join in this cultural boycotting of a celebrity or a concept or a company that was indicted by that movement. And until then, boycotting used to look like refusing to buy something or refusing to participate in something. Now social media has offered a new way for a mass public refusal to accept or legitimize someone or something that people judge to be bad. Canceling is like exile or shunning. Exile. That's powerful punishment. Cut off from all your people and context. Adam and Eve exiled from Eden, the Hindu god Rama exiled from his home and family by his cruel stepmother, the Hebrew people exiled in recorded history from Israel to Babylon, ostracism, the ancient Greek punishment that banished Athenians for 10 years at a time. There are countless examples the world over. And shunning, which is a decision by a group or community to socially reject a person, ceasing all interaction with them. It is simple, it is brutal, it is effective. It can coerce a change in behavior. It can also do profound, lasting psychological damage. These things used to be mostly obsolete, though there have been still a few cultures and faiths which yet employ them. But now, with the rise of cancel culture, they are effectively back. Shunning, exiling, hating, branding someone with 280 scarlet letters in a tweet of perfect vivisection. Social media has given us new wineskins for old wine. Did we need new wineskins? Do we need old wine? Who actually deserves to be canceled, to be shunned, to be publicly excoriated, which we know can be so devastating as to drive people to suicide? It has. I am not asking in order to create a list of those who deserve it, and I don't mean to suggest no one deserves it. Sometimes people do terrible things, enough that a terrible punishment is warranted. I am asking to make the point that canceling does not invite change. Canceling is retribution. But it isn't an inducement to growth. And it is not a motivation for real change. You cannot change people by threatening them or hating on them. When you try to make people change their behavior by threats or hostility, that is coercion, and the offspring of coercion are resentment, fear, and resistance. Not growth, not evolution, certainly not transformation. Canceling, shunning, exiling those we disagree with every time about everything will not help us change the world. It is not how we win or open hearts and minds and souls. When the renowned director and dramaturge Oscar Eustis spoke from this pulpit a couple of years ago as a guest of the Providence Athenaeum, he talked about what he believes is the role of theater in civilization, in democratic society in particular. Mr. Eustis used to be a Trinity rep. He is now the artistic director of the Public Theater in New York. One of his triumphs is a little show you might have heard of called Hamilton. You may remember that almost 4 years ago, right after our current president and vice president were elected, Mike Pence went to go see Hamilton. And after the show, during the curtain call, the cast read a brief message to then Vice President-elect Pence, thanking him for attending, pointing out that the show and its cast represent the rich racial and cultural diversity of America, and letting him know that they were afraid. They were afraid the new administration would not support them in all their variety, would not defend their inalienable rights. They hoped the show had inspired him to uphold America's values, to uphold all of them. And the new president-elect immediately condemned their message as harassing and rude, and his supporters called for a Hamilton boycott, hoping to shut the whole show down. The message spread across the country like wildfire. Of course, that did not happen. And Hamilton continued to be one of the hardest to get tickets on Broadway. But when Mr. Eustis told that story here in this pulpit, in his talk, he said, here's the thing. We, Hamilton, had already boycotted them. What? Yes. He said, the people who were declaring they would boycott were never going to come anyway. They couldn't afford it, they couldn't get to it, the play wasn't for them. Mr. Eustis realized he and the team who had produced Hamilton had failed all those people that it left out of its reach. So they produced another play, Sweat, a Pulitzer Prize-winning drama about the struggles for work and dignity in Reading, Pennsylvania. And they sent the play with its Broadway performers not on the usual tour through major U.S. cities, but on a tour of the Rust Belt, also known, especially right now, as the swing states. Erie, Pennsylvania, Ashtabula, Ohio, Saginaw, Michigan, Hayward, Wisconsin. They reached out, they sent the play to its people who had gone so long unserved by the arts in the same way they had economically been abandoned, ignored, shunned. This play about race and poverty in steel towns in Pennsylvania toured where people would recognize themselves in it. And people came. White people came, black people came, they engaged with the play with each other. In group gatherings after the show, they opened up to each other. They often wept because they felt heard. Not schooled, not censured, not attacked or criticized or canceled, heard. Mr. Eustis said the play was about losing the town's identity and their sense of belonging not to the future, but the past. And that is what allowed for the opening and deepening in all those discussions after the performance, the opening and the deepening that were opportunities for growth and change and transformation. And that is how they are won, by listening and not condemning, by showing respect and compassion to people who are themselves struggling. What Sweat did was compassionate and respectful, and ultimately cathartic. And it even allows space for an energy that we progressives cannot lose sight of, which is joy. The joy that goes with affirmation, the joy that comes with community, the joy that builds between people who can see themselves and each other as important and connected and beautiful. That is the recipe for joy. And it is also the foundation of progressivism. Commitment to justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, participants in an interdependent web of all existence. We should be catching fire from each other, catching each other up in the beauty and power of our possibilities and commitments and care. We can't afford to lose that, to be more about condemnation than affirmation, to be so caught up in what is ugly that we lose sight of what is beautiful, of our ability to celebrate. One of the best examples of this, the one that reminds me most of worship, given that it wasn't at all, the best communion, the best inspiration that wasn't in a worship service, is a video clip you're about to see. It is a backstory video of the very first group rehearsal of the anthemic song, "This Is Me," from the recent film, The Greatest Showman. We've used this song in our worship here because the song proclaims what our own Unitarian Universalist faith believes, that we all belong, that we all deserve love and respect, that we are gifts who shouldn't have to endure hate and hurt, that we are brave and bruised and who we are meant to be. So take a look now and watch what happens. Watch them get drawn into their own song. Watch them go in this very first rehearsal from tentative to unstoppable. Look what happens to their faces and their bodies, their souls. Watch them go from learning their message to living it until it is not a rehearsal at all. It's church that comes to be in all that unfolding. It is faith that explodes among them. It is the fire of joy, beauty, and power that they create and release together. Look out, because here we come, and we're marching on to the beat we drum. We're not scared to be seen. We make no apologies. This is we. May I suggest that in these times that afflict and assault so much that we believe in, that resistance doesn't always need to look like being dug in, that our strength doesn't only have to come from our outrage and our righteousness. May I suggest that sometimes resistance must look like risking, like leaping, like exulting, like arms open, like never letting go of the love we owe ourselves and each other, like celebrating the goodness and the glory within and among us, the belonging we all believe in, the evolution and transformation that we believe is possible for anyone, anywhere, anytime. May I suggest that we stay humble enough to know that we don't know everything, brave enough to keep reaching out across differences, wise enough to perceive opportunities for understanding and growth, quick enough to seize them, forgiving and faithful enough to make transformation possible for everyone, including me, including you, aware enough always to nurture joy. For thus are we made glorious. Amen. The sermon's been long. I won't go on about the offering. You know how much we need it. We depend on the weekly generosity of everyone, including new folks who have just been coming, just been tuning in and watching from different places near and far. Please take a moment now and give online to this community. Thank you so, so much for all you give and all you do and all you are. We have one invitation for this week about other ways to participate in our faith, and that is that we're having a special meeting on Wednesday evening from 7 to 8 via Zoom, when we're going to try to catch up on what's been happening in the city of Providence in terms of the demonstrations that have been going on this past week that may be continuing into next week. We don't know yet, but we're going to have a meeting on Wednesday night to hear and understand more about this. Steve Ahlquist, who's been covering most of those demonstrations live as a reporter, is going to talk about what he has seen and heard there, and we're going to have a chance to talk about it together as members and friends of this community. If what you wanted to do was get that information, you can sign off. If you also want to think about what we can do to be of help and to respond to what's going on, there's going to be a second part of that meeting that will look at what are the ways we can get involved. We need to be really careful because of the rising levels of COVID, but that doesn't leave us unable to muster some responses. So we're going to talk about what that can and should look like, and volunteers will be very, very welcome to help us figure out what we can do going forward in response to all of that. So to sign up for that, make sure that you either call or email our church administrator, Nancy Forstrom, right away, and we will send out the link on Wednesday for people who have signed up. Our closing words come from the writing of Reverend Dr. Kristen Harper, Unitarian Universalist minister out on Cape Cod. I do not wish to breathe another breath if it is not shared with others. The breath of life is not mine alone. I brought myself to be with you, hoping that by inhaling the compassion, the courage, the hope found here, I can exhale the fear, the selfishness, the separateness that I keep so close to my skin. I cannot live another moment, at least not one of joy, unless you and I find our oneness somewhere among each other. Somewhere between the noise, somewhere within the silence of the next breath. Can we join in the words for extinguishing our chalice? We carry the flame of peace and love and hope until we meet again.
May